And then I saw there was a change in the agenda tonight. Is it something significant? I haven't had a chance to pull it up.
Are you referring to the notification from Board Docs that there was something added to the agenda?
Correct.
I saw that too. I think it was for part 1 for last night. I think it was the slides.
It was
Got
the
it.
PowerPoint that was added to part 1.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody at 6 o'clock. Thank you for joining us for our board study session. We'll call this meeting to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call for the attendance?
Director Ray,
Director Ray here.
Director Kelly, Director Kingman,
Here.
President Levesque,
Here.
Director Knapp.
Here.
Student Advisor Madeline Andrich,
Here.
Student Advisor Kyle Schroeder,
Here.
Superintendent Sweeting.
Here.
Thank you, Debbie.
Mhm.
We'll mark down that Director Kelly is excused. She let us know she wasn't going to be able to attend tonight. Could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's study session.
I'll make a motion.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Can we have a vote, please?
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Kingman,
Aye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Knapp.
Aye.
Thank you. So that brings us to our welcome and our overview of tonight's evening, and that's going to be Dr. Sweeting. Sorry, it's been like deja vu all over again. Like we were just here doing this a day ago. So this is part 2 of our fun activities from yesterday.
And that is so true. Thank you, President Levesque. So last night, when we were together for part 1 study session, we learned about how we can grow and become a more effective board team by creating conditions of success for our students. And we also learned about a little bit more about each other. And I know that in the beginning, Director Kingman had some technical difficulties because just some computer things. So we're hoping, Director Kingman, that maybe next Monday night during board comments, you could share the answers to those 4 questions so we get to know you a little bit more, if that's okay. So be thinking about those questions, or you're welcome to share them tonight. It's up to you, but
No, sure. Thank you. I sure will next time.
okay. All right, great. Okay. And then we also last night took just a brief view of our strategic plan and looked at the components that are within the plan and looked at the goals and talked about the metrics and talked about the values that are stated and the mission that is what our focus and foundation is. And we also took a peek at the district data dashboard and the OSPI report card site. So those were things that we learned about last night, and more in those areas to come in February. So tonight, we're going to engage in some learning and understanding of what's called Universal Design for Learning. And we call it UDL for short. So, but it stands for Universal Design for Learning. And so we're going to learn more about that. And then after that, after a brief break, we are going to have our directors speak to us and share with us some of the services and programs that they oversee that support the varied needs of students. And I will say that just up front that Dave McKellar is unable to be with us tonight, so I'm going to have the honor of sharing those slides, but with a disclaimer that specific questions might have to be sent his way after the presentation, but I'll do my best to share information there. And so with that, I would just want to move forward and introduce Carrie Henderson Burke. She is the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and she's going to share with us information about Universal Design for Learning.
Thank you, Dr. Sweeting. Good evening, President Levesque and Board of Directors. I'm very excited to share this information with you tonight about Universal Design for Learning. I believe this will be the core work of the Teaching and Learning Department and a district initiative in some form or another for the next 7 to 10 years. It's that big and it's that important that we anticipate spending a great deal of time learning and implementing the principles that we're going to learn about a little bit tonight in our presentation. So,
Carrie, I'm going to stop sharing now so you can put your presentation up.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, and just throughout the night, I just want the board members to know we're going to kind of go back and forth. People will be sharing their presentations. We'll do a little bit of that. So there you go.
Thank you. All right, let me get my screen up here. It always takes a minute to flip back and forth. So, all right, this is just a quick introduction. UDL, as I've said, is probably our major district initiative for 7 to 10 years. So this, as you can imagine, is just going to be the very tip of the iceberg. So we will get going with our introduction. the most fundamental question, of course, that we want to know is what is it? And in its simplest form, UDL is an approach to teaching and learning. It's a philosophy, a belief system, and then actions that support that philosophy and belief. There's nothing particularly new, truth to tell, in what you are going to hear tonight. We'll get to why we're spending so much time on something that might not be a new concept as we move through the content, okay? So the underlying principles and beliefs of UDL are that the learning barriers that our students experience in school aren't about the students. They're about the curriculum and they're about the learning environment. So as the creators, developers, and refiners of those systems, it's our job as the school adults to ensure that we remove those barriers, hopefully before the kids even enter the door, through quality planning, right? So that planning is encompassed in the very basic units of instruction, lesson design, and unit design. In so many ways, UDL is a flashback to entry-level education courses because lesson planning is where they begin. So that's not new. Teachers know full well the importance of quality lesson design. But it's not just a good lesson design, it's a flexible lesson design. So we'll get into that in a little bit more, but it's really, remember, it's our job to shape an environment and use curriculum materials and instruct in a manner that meets the needs of all students. That's our responsibility on a most fundamental level. The truth is UDL is a little bit plagiarized. And it comes out of the architectural world. It comes out of universal design. And that was, architects were trying to design buildings that every person could access. We want people to be able to do the very basics of entering any building that they need to get into. And so universal design in architecture is something like, instead of only having stairs, we're going to have ramps, because ramps can be used by people on foot, by people in wheelchairs, by people with baby carriages, by people on bicycles, by people on skateboards, by people with walkers. There's no barrier to entrance when you have a ramp. So we remove that barrier and more people can access. So that's the big picture idea. Dr. Katie Novak is a trainer that we have been working with for the last 2 years. And her summary of that is what's necessary for some is actually good for all, right? If we remove barriers for a percentage of our population, everybody can access it and everybody benefits from that. So not a difficult concept, but something that we really need to become so much more intentional about applying to our lessons. So this is the really classic cartoon about thinking in a UDL kind of fashion, in a way that removes barriers before kids even get here. So here we have someone shoveling snow off the steps, telling other kids to hang on, we're going to finish clearing the steps before we clear the ramp, when the truth is everybody could go in all at once if we just started with the ramp. So that's the goal, start with the ramp. That's maybe our new mantra. So the principles of UDL are simple. The application is complex. So as our first year, we've been working and learning about UDL for 2 years. There's been a small lead team developing some understanding and looking at our own system. This is the first year that we've kind of taken it out to broader staff. And you've already heard a little bit about how we're doing that, but our goal is to keep it simple from the outset, as simple as possible. But you know about our universal SIP goal. Arlington staff will increase collective efficacy. That means our own confidence in our own power to bring about good change in Tier 1 instruction, where every kid has access, by embracing the principles of variability and firm goals and flexible means. So most of our learning this year with staff is about the principle of variability and firm goals and flexible means. We are using our Friday early release days. Thank you, board, for approving that. That gives us a universal avenue as a district to access all of our stuff with some kind of regularity, with common professional development. It's really been quite a powerful tool in our arsenal. The lead team that is made up of Dr. Sweeting, Carrie Helgeson, Carl Olson, and Dave McKellar and me have worked with kind of our guiding coalition team, which is a slightly bigger team, to develop modules. That is 6 lessons that we bring out to buildings and to introduce these core principles of UDL. I love this. I'm a biased source, we'll just call a spade, but the modules are intended to be small, digestible snippets. So many times, I mean, you've been through trainings and other learning opportunities that were day long, and at the end of it, you think to yourself, I don't know what I'm going to retain because there was so much of it. Our modules are designed to be 20 to 30 minutes long. First of all, the professional development is on a Friday afternoon. Tough time to hold an audience, tough time to teach an audience, tough time for an audience to hang on to it. So that little, we've gotten some really good feedback from staff about appreciating that it's a manageable amount of information that we're teaching at the same time. We have gone out to buildings and done 2 modules out of 6 at this point, just so you know, keeping it simple. So what I'd like to do with the rest of our time together tonight is actually lead you through the first module that our staff has participated in, and that is an introduction to that core principle of variability. So we always, when we go out to do professional learnings, we want to model quality teaching. And so the first thing we start with on our modules are objectives. This is what you will be able to do by the end of our session today, be able to do or understand or articulate, right? So we have 3 learning objectives for you tonight. One is to be able to define variability. That seems a little bit obvious, but we want you to be able to do it. The definition is just the beginning. We also want you to understand why it's dangerous to ignore the principle of variability when it comes to instructing kids. And we want you to also be able to say, why are we doing this? That's our 3 objectives. Do we have any questions about what you're going to cover or what you're going to be able to do by the end of our first module? Okay, I'm relying on you to shout out if you need it. So the first thing we're going to do is define variability. And here's the great thing. You probably already know what it is. It's not difficult. Variability, very simply, is the principle that every person learns differently. The longer I live, the more I need to talk in order to learn. That's not a thrilling principle to my husband, but it's just the truth, right? My dad is a reader. He needs to read and internally process to learn and understand something new. My husband can do anything he wants if he has a YouTube video. He can see it and then he can do it. That's what his learning needs are in his favorite, I guess, capacity. Everybody learns in a wide variety of ways. We're not pigeonholing kids into one single method, but we all have our preferences, and that's what variability acknowledges. There's nothing new in that concept, right? There's nothing new in this concept for our staff. Nobody gasped in shock and awe when we said, here's the definition of variability, right? Because we all already know it. So the point of this module with staff was actually to take it to the next step. So you already know this principle. Why are we taking your time to cover it? Why is it important enough that we're interrupting your Friday afternoon with this information? And that is because there are some dangers that occur in a classroom and a school and an entire school system if we don't plan proactively for variability. So when we did this module for staff, we gave staff learning choices. Why? Because everybody learns differently. I believe Debbie sent you these 3 resources to access. There are 3 ways, and I am going to ask you to engage with this so that you can learn in a style that works best for you. So you have 3 options. 2 of them are video options. Video option number 1 is 5 more minutes. And I promise that more is not misspelled. Shelley Moore is the name of the woman who leads 5 more minutes. If you are interested in accessing some information from an expert on special education, Shelley Moore is a terrific person to learn from. If you are interested in bringing in some kids who might be marginalized, Shelley Moore is a terrific resource for you. If that's your passion, she's going to be your 5-minute teacher tonight, right? The other video option is called tuna noodle casserole. So if you happen to be a foodie, I don't know if you can be a foodie and love tuna noodle casserole. I don't know. But if you're a foodie, this might be a great way for you. If you like to learn through analogy, this might be the right learning choice for you to make tonight as you learn a little bit more about variability. If you are a reader who might be particularly interested in social justice, there is an article also available to you in that resource list, and it's called Average Men and Women. So we're going to give you 5 to 7 minutes to access these learning options. And then we're going to come back as a whole group and just chat through a little bit about what you learned. Does everybody have access to those 3 options?
Was that
And
an
they,
email?
they were actually they were listed on the board plate. So if you go to Board Docs and go to the board plate, you can see them listed there, I believe. Debbie, did you send them to them by email?
I am sending them right now.
Thank you, Debbie.
So I've just forwarded Carrie's email to me that had the links and the article attached. So it'll look like a forward from Carrie and I.
By the way, when we do these with staff, we send them out the morning of our afternoon PD. So if people want to cheat and read more than one article or access more than one resource, they can do it. We're probably not going to discourage that.
I got the email. Thank you, Debbie. Did everybody else get that?
I'm working on it.
When you're going through your resource, you have a guiding question. And that is, what did you learn about the danger of ignoring variability through your resource? Nobody's going to tell you overtly what the danger is. You'll infer that from your own experience with the resource.
So we just do that independently and then we come back in a few minutes.
You betcha. I'll let you know in about 6 minutes. And if you are looking at a video resource, it would be great if you would mute yourself. by my timer, it's been 6 minutes. If we were in a group, I would say, let me know if you need more time and we'll extend it. But I'm wondering if you have, as a learner, if you've had enough time to at least get the gist of what your respective resources provide. Do we need more time, or are we okay to move on and discuss?
Carrie, I think I learned that I want to do all of the choices. I have a hard time picking.
I know it's very difficult.
So I wanted to do all of those things. I was only supposed to pick one, wasn't I?
For today, here's the good news. You have access to them, all you'd like. So, yeah. Okay, but are we okay with time to at least gotten the gist of one? I've got cameras off, so I can't quite see everybody. Silence means yes, so I'm going to go ahead and go. All right.
Good to go. Good to go,
Thank you.
Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the guiding question for each of these articles was, what's the danger of ignoring variability? So let's take a few minutes and discuss that. What happens when variability is ignored or perhaps not understood? Is there someone who read or listened to the 5 More Minutes video that would like to talk about the potential dangers that you inferred?
Sure, I can go.
Thank you, Kyle.
In the video, they related curriculum and teaching to pilots. I forget when it was, but it was from a while ago. And so they basically talked about how the rigidness of having a one-size-fits-all program, or in the example, it was a plane, how it doesn't work. And so it caused the pilots to crash. And in the same way, a one-size-fits-all curriculum causes students to not do as well as they could, as when we say replaced it with something that has variability and something that can be changed to better support the variability of the students.
Thank you. You should write an article on that, right? Yeah, ignore variability and pilots get in accidents, ignore variability in school, and and kids, we run the risk of our students not learning and achieving, right? Remember, UDL means the basic belief is if there are flaws in the system, it's in our learning environment and in our curriculum, not in the kids. The flaws were not in the pilots. It was not wrong of them to have different measurements, right? Great. Is there someone who read or listened to the tuna noodle casserole video who would like to share what is the danger? Thanks, Mary, go ahead.
So it's very, very interesting. I love tuna noodle casserole, but I know a lot of people do not. But it's very curious that was a good attention getter. The idea was that you're planning a dinner party, and you're inviting a lot of different people, and because a lot of different people have a lot of different nutrition needs, that somebody's probably going to be pescatarian or vegetarian or diabetic or gluten-free or allergic to milk or fish or something. So there's going to be some dietary restrictions, and you say, well, I'm just going to make tuna noodle casserole. And then so like the danger would be a lot of people would be very unhappy. And so if you just have one thing that serves all people, a lot of people aren't going to be able to access it, use it, enjoy it. But if you have like a buffet of all the different ingredients, then people can use what they need to get what they need according to their own specific differences. That's what I got out of it. It's all about the buffet. So I'm all about that.
The learning buffet. Carl calls it the UDL kitchen, by the way. But right, the danger is if you serve only tuna noodle casserole, you're going to have hungry and or upset guests at the end of the evening. If you don't plan a buffet in a classroom, then we have kids that may not learn, that may not be engaged, that may not like school, that may become increasingly disenfranchised or disengaged with the important work of learning. Terrific. Thank you. Did anybody tackle the article average men and women?
So I did the video
Okay.
as well, and I agree with everything Mary said, really on that. I love tuna noodle casserole though.
This should be a question on an opener one night. Raise your hand if you love tuna noodle casserole.
I was like, that looks great. I should
tuna noodle casserole.
I'm definitely making that soon. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was good. So I looked at the article
Okay.
as well, and I kind of skimmed it a little bit of, but yeah, it was a, it talked about the eugenic movement and all that stuff in the 40s, and it related. It must have been similar to the other video that Kyle was talking about, because it talked about Air Force and all the crashes they were having, and how like one size doesn't fit all, basically, right? And you need to have, I guess, adjustments. But led me down a different path, because I'm like, well, is it just a pilot error, or is there some airframe stuff that's going on with the crashes? So there's a lot of other things, but I understand what the focus of it was, this particular thing. But yeah, it was essentially the same thing, right? A buffet of learning styles, right? So adjustments. One thing isn't the right thing for everybody.
That article, it was one of the most fascinating things. I had to read it like 4 times. And the first time I literally threw it on the floor because there's a great example. So the pilot example is a terrific example of trying to fit everybody into one mold, right? There's an average set of measurements for pilots. And so a cockpit was constructed in a singular measurement, assuming that most people would fit it. Most men, they were all men at the time, right?
Right, and that's the other strange part too, right? Yes.
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 There's a lot of stuff in that article to dig through, but
Right.
but when people understood that there weren't actually men that fit the average measurements, when they compared actual measurements to the measurements that cockpits were based on, there were like 3 people that had those measurements out of the thousands of pilots in existence at the time, right? So the idea of an average pilot is a complete misnomer. So they adjusted
Totally.
cockpits, right?
Yeah.
The article did you get into the part about the women and average measurements?
I may have skimmed that at the bottom, because I did the video first. So did talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So we have data from pilots that was used in a constructive manner. The data from women, the same idea. The average woman has these measurements. And guess what? Nobody actually fit the measurements. There was a contest, and there was a woman who came closest to it. She became known as Norma because she was normal.
Oh, yeah.
She was the normal woman, right?
Yeah.
But nobody actually fit the measurements. And guess what? As a result of nobody fitting the measurements, women were given diet and exercise recommendations. So that might be why I threw it on the floor the first time I read it. Anyways, the danger of ignoring variability is literal death and health of pilots, and the collective view, historic view of the value of women and what they should be, right? That was influenced by misusing averages. So the danger of variability is assuming that there's an average in the first place. In classrooms, assuming there's an average is a danger, right? We can use averages. They're not unusable, but stopping at average is probably immoral, right? So it's a dangerous thing to ignore variability. All right, now I'm not going to make you do this part, I want you to know. But so after we have variable opportunities for staff to learn about variability and why it's dangerous, and conversely, which I didn't take the time to do tonight, to talk about what the benefits of planning for variability and expecting variability and knowing that it's normal and healthy for humans to learn variably, right? Choose your resource and then choose the way you express what you learned. So when we do this module with staff, or when we did it, we gave them options. We decided you can get together with a group or you can work individually. That's part of variability and planning for it. You can make a poster that summarizes the concepts that most struck you. You could create a Jamboard. I'll show you an example of a Jamboard that Kent Prairie put together when we went there. We have down here a Screencastify video for our tech heads who wanted to create a commercial or a summary or just a little video about what they learned and what they thought. Again, all of these were options for staff to do individually, in pairs, in small groups, in large groups. The great advantage of working with adults is they can organize themselves quickly. We also left it open for folks to choose a different method to express what they learned. We are not the end all be all on determining how you should best show what you learned. So we didn't get very many others, but I do want to show you what a small group at Camp Prairie created. So bear with me while I pull this up here. This is a Jamboard, which is just a terrific way to socially distance and share learning all together. So can you see the beach scene? You can see that staff are every bit as naughty as kids in a classroom, because what shall I write in this text box was, that just appeared on a Jamboard, and someone wrote hello just to the general audience. That's part of the fun of working with teachers too, actually. So, so there's a lot of humor on this, but there's also the answer. What could appear to be eggs is actually wondering how oh, never mind. Here's this. This was the joke page, sorry. Here's the tuna noodle casserole summary, right? I'm a foodie that loves a good buffet. This analogy makes perfect sense because my instruction should represent that buffet. This way, there's something for every type of learner, the dairy-free, the gluten-free, et cetera, et cetera. Great questions come up sometimes. What does this look like for kindergartners, for our littlest learners, right? How do we teach students to choose what works best? Because that's a learning process also. So there's a lot of different thinking that can emerge from a Jamboard when a group of teachers and people get together to look it over. Here's the 5 more minute video. So someone found a cockpit picture clip. I love it. Students adjust and control their own learning based on a variety of levels and lessons. Pick your learning and go with it, right? There's the pilot analogy, adjustable classrooms. Questions and thoughts from people? They just write. The great thing about Jamboard is you can answer your initial question, but there's space to say, here's what else I'm wondering. What tools do we have to help kids learn? What is the difference between differentiation and UDL? That's a really important question that someone brought up. So just an example of how Kent Prairie chose to express its learning at the end of module 1. So is my PowerPoint back up? Does that make sense? Okay. We'll wrap it up here in just a few minutes. The other thing that I want to show you is wanting to model effective teaching, right? We have lesson objectives. Can you define variability after this module? Did you learn about the dangers of variability? Great. We didn't talk about this, but we really did during the discussion with staff, and that is, why are we spending our time on this? It's pretty obvious, I think, for the most part, but we did want staff to be able to say out loud, this matters because it's my job to adjust my teaching to kids' learning, right? So after all of that is over, great teaching requires feedback, right? It requires seeking information from the audience. And so I'm going to show you a collection of feedback forms that we gathered after Eagle Creek's module. So let me get that up and I will share my screen again if I can figure out the tech for it. So the questions are similar for our across modules. There are a few variations, but this really will give you a good idea of what we ask. So we want folks to identify their grade level and team. In case we need to disaggregate something, we are not looking for individual responses. We're looking for collective understanding. So the kindergarten questions that came up at Camp Prairie were pretty intriguing. So asking this question allows us to look at what other kindergarten teachers might be wondering across the district. We wanted staff to articulate what are the benefits of embracing variability, why it's our focus. What does it mean for me? We also want staff to know that we planned for variability in this lesson because we, of course, eventually want staff to start doing this. And then feedback for the team. So here are some of the responses. We'll just go through a few of these so you get a flavor for how honest staff are and how this is not going to shock you, but how thoughtful our staff is about their learning. So Eagle Creek, what are the benefits? They'll be able to thrive and showcase their skills. Student success and empowerment. All kids find means of succeeding. I think that's really important. Meeting all kids' needs, right? Next question. well, I guess we're still on benefits. Sorry. Why are we focusing on it? So students can thrive. It's important for students in their learning to focus on students. And I love this answer. It's straightforward and simple. It's because kids matter. That's why we're focusing on variability. And then let's just hop down. I want to show you some of the feedback that we get. UDL topic I learned through, reinforced what one student or what one teacher already learned. Clear and concise. Maybe, and I loved this, maybe an example or two of ideas in the classroom, like before and after considering variability. That's a terrific piece of information that we can eventually take to staff and say, here's a classroom before UDL variability, here's a classroom after, what differences do you see? Just there's a lot of expression of gratitude in here. I would love to see examples of how teachers do this in younger grades. So a question at Camp Prairie, a question at Eagle Creek. Really a terrific learning opportunity for the planning team to take this and move on for our next steps and make sure that we are hearing what our students' voices are as we plan for variability, as we work through the content. So that is the end of module 1. What questions do you have about the work so far or about anything connected to UDL so far?
I might have missed this at the beginning, but did this just start this year, these modules and the UDL introduction?
Yes, with staff. The lead team has been working for, this is our 2nd year of learning together, and this is our 1st year of staff learning. Yeah.
It was neat because Carrie and team has been engaging the leadership team in these modules so that they have that pre-knowledge and in pre-engagement too, so that they can work with their staff. So, and it's a result of working with inclusionary practices. We've been involved in that work with the state at the state level. We have a team that's been working on that, and this is all connected to that, which has been maybe even more than 2 years. I think this is our 3rd year of inclusionary practices.
So the reason this is a 7 to 10 year initiative is because planning this way is time intensive. Gathering resource, it's a resource hungry approach to teaching and learning. It also highlights we have some really good curriculum materials in place, but they don't meet the needs of every kid. So it has some implications for what resources we provide for teachers as they work with kids and how we conduct curriculum adoptions, working with what's available and then improving it for our staff. So 7 to 10 years is a pretty realistic timeline as we gradually become more natural at planning for variability. And I can't stress this enough, valuing variability as an important trait of humanness, right? We can all value it in theory, but if it's a one size fits all lesson, it's not embraced and kids walk away feeling like failures. Some do. We have a narrow band of kids who succeed when we don't plan for variability. So.
Hey, Carrie.
Yes.
Maybe not exactly good formulated questions that are coming to my mind, but some comment. So I know we just started, and I know obviously there's a lot going on in the last couple of years. So how do you think it's going in the situation that we're dealing with, right? And would you expect that we're, I guess, farther, I don't want to say farther along, but is it easier because of the changes that we've made over the last couple of years in response to what we're doing, or do you think is it just more challenging because everything else is going on right now to kind of go through this new UDL, teaching method?
Is it possible to say yes to both of those answers? Is it easier because of everything we've gone through? I think the backhanded benefits of going through distance learning and hybrid instruction is everybody understands it didn't work for every kid. So in a backhanded way, it was an unintended opportunity to understand on a deeper, much more personal, much longer term than any of us ever wanted way that we need to do some different things for kids. And we were limited in what we could do for kids, right? I'm not apologizing for any of the work that our teachers tried so hard at, but it is a painful illustration of why it matters. I do think it is harder at this point in time. Every article that I've read for the last year and a half said, please don't ask staff to do a ton of new and different things because nobody has the bandwidth for it. So hence the 20 to 30 minute snippets of content on a Friday afternoon. I also want to be clear in that some of the work of the lead team and our district leadership team and our guiding coalition is determining some accountability for this. And I mean positive accountability. This is our learning year. We are not asking teachers directly to start planning for variability. We are encouraging it. We've had teachers that have modeled variability lessons for their staffs after fearfully trying it with kids, right, with little people, and you're like, oh, can they handle choice? Well, of course they can handle choice when they're given an opportunity to learn how to manage it. And so when we trust them, it was pretty cool. And the teachers that did it were so excited, they went and talked about it at the staff meeting to encourage the rest of their building to give it a shot and give kids some choice and some voice and control in their learning. We have not said by the end of the year, you will have a unit plan based on variability. And let's make no mistake about it. There's a core of excitement about recognizing this is important. And there is a giant core of fear because every building has asked on some level, are you asking us to do this? And how are we supposed to do it? Because it's time hungry, it's time intensive, it's resource intensive. So we're not asking staff directly to do anything with it at this point. We're asking staff to learn the principles. And when the time is right, we work with building principals and we say what's fair, right, and just for your building. Because our teachers are variable as well. And our teachers are in a variety of places. And we have to plan for that and expect it and embrace it as a system, or else we are hypocrites.
Carrie, can I ask a question? So you talked about how we need more resources to implement this. Can you give an example of what are some of the resources that people are asking about or that we could improve or increase? Or like, are we talking math manipulatives? Or are we talking about, I don't know, something else?
And I don't even know that I know the answer to that question fully, Mary, but I do believe math manipulatives will be part of it. And the truth is we have a ton of math manipulatives across the district. We just need to distribute them and ensure that kids have access to them. But I wonder about like our reading curriculums, right? Which tend to be everybody reads the same article and everybody talks about the same article and everybody writes about the same article. Sometimes that's okay, right? I wanted to be clear with staff that it's okay sometimes to say everybody's doing this today because we need everybody to be able to write this genre, right? So I don't know that I know the answer, but I do know that when we were looking for resources for this, it took us probably 4 hours to settle on those 3 resources. So we're looking for visuals for learning. We're looking for videos for learning. We're looking for, a variety of reading materials at different levels and in different languages. And that maybe some kids listen to and others read. So
is there any opportunities for sharing? Like some classrooms have one, I don't know, something like kind of like a roving library of fun things that could go around. And has that been?
Yeah, we expect as we move forward through this, we don't require teachers to work in isolation, right? So teachers are members of the PLC, and that's a planning team that can work collectively on a project or divvy up the responsibilities and say, you're going to go look for this. I'm going to, so that we maximize. It's time hungry and time intensive, but we have some structures in place that support that. And we are also really public about saying you have time. We're not saying do it now. We're saying learn it and we'll get better at it over a period of years. So I'm sorry, that's a squishy answer to the materials needed question, but at this point, I don't have a good answer.
That was a perfect answer.
It was honest, at least. Any other questions tonight?
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Mike.
My name's Mike. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So this must make the evaluation process difficult if people are on variable paths. How do you have some sort of equitable evaluation process?
That is a terrific question that we haven't touched on in variable one or in module one. The first principle of our universal SIP goal is variability, but the second goal is firm goals with flexible means. This does not have separate learning goals for kids. Everybody's working on the same goal. There's just a different path available to get there. So the evaluation process, I will not deny what you've said. It can get out of hand. If you offer too many opportunities for kids to express their learning, it's going to be a zoo and really difficult to track. Learn that the hard way with our DLT team. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know who submitted what. How am I supposed to track this? So that's okay. We learn from our mistakes. That's called growth mindset. But because everybody's working on the same goal, the assessments may look different for each kid, but the expectation for what they learn isn't different.
Thank you.
You betcha. Okay. Thank you so much for your kind attention. We've got our work cut out for us, but it's kind of fun. So thank you.
Thank you for giving us lots of choices on how we learning about different choices. That's very, very good. The next thing on the agenda at 6:50 is a brief break. So I'm gonna invite everybody to take a 10-minute break and take care of yourself. And we'll see you back at 7 o'clock.
Thanks, Mary.
All right, if we could all gather again, I show that it's 7 o'clock. Thank you for letting us take a break. Dr. Sweeting, do you want to take us to the next step?
Yes, I will. So next, we are going to have each director share about the areas that they oversee, the programs or services, and or both. And so we're going to start tonight with Mark Earhart, the Director of Technology. So Mark, I'm going to stop sharing if you would like, and then you're going to share your screen, or would you like me to advance the slides?
Either way, I can share my screen.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and then you can do that.
Okay, where this one go? Okay, you seeing that?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay, so good evening, members of the board. I'm Mark Earhart. I'm the Technology Director for Arlington School District. And I want to talk a little bit about technology and answer any questions you might have. The staff of the tech department consists of myself and Shannon Rader, who's our network engineer, and then we have 6 techs. And so our philosophy of providing service to people in the district is to have our technicians be assigned to specific buildings. We feel like it creates a better relationship between the staff and the technician, and they get to know them and they get to rely on them. They know who to talk to when they have a problem. So Keith Ayers covers our middle schools. Kevin Knudsen covers most of the district as far as inventory and across the entire district, picking up things, repairing things, constructing things. Bill Roman does the high school. Ian LaRue does Weston High School, Pioneer and Presidents. Darren does Eagle Creek, Kent Prairie, and Stille Valley. And Brett is new to our department this year, and he is covering the district office and transportation and fills in for people when they're gone and kind of is learning a little bit of everything. So what does it look like? Technology is really, people say, oh, what's technology? Well, it's like everything in the district these days. Pretty much we say sometimes anything that's connected to electricity pretty much becomes technology anymore. And so what does it look like? So we have the way the district network works and how does it work for people when they access the internet. We've got a 2 gigabyte connection to the internet that basically routes all of our traffic into the district. And then that goes out to 10 network locations across the district, which we run over 10 gigabyte fiber optic lines. One thing that's unique to Arlington School District is that for 8 of these locations, we actually own the fiber that we connect to all of those places. And so we have the fiber on poles and we pay PUD for some rental of those, but that's pretty unique for school districts in this area. Then it connects to about 375 wireless access points. At any given time, we have close to 4,000 wireless clients connected to our network during a normal school day. And we've got multiple wired computers and printers and other devices and phones and intercoms and hotspots and fish cams and you name it, we service it. And so one thing that we have leveraged the last couple of years is some of the funds that have been available through the COVID crisis. And so we have used CARES Act money. We've used other monies that have been available. This last year, there was a grant that came up that was called the Emergency Connectivity Grant. And with that, we applied for replacing our primary Chromebooks that we had in the schools. So basically 1st through 3rd grade and some of the kindergartens. And to replace 300 of the teachers' laptops that we had that were, some of them were about 10 years old. The grant allowed us $400 per device. And so for those 1,750 Chromebooks that we just received about a week ago, we don't pay anything. And for the 300 MacBook Air laptops, we'll actually be getting those for about $500 a device. And so that's a total savings of about $750,000 to the district. And with the CARES Act and the different funds that we received over the last 2 years, we've replaced will have replaced all of the Chromebooks in the entire district over the last couple of years. So it puts us in a really solid place at the end of this year as far as having equipment that's going to be sustainable and be able to keep those running. Typically, the life of a new Chromebook these days is about 5 to 6 years. And so that leaves us in a pretty good place fiscally for that kind of stuff. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is kind of like a little bit of our philosophy or guiding principles for technology in the district. And one thing that we learned through COVID was that we needed to have a consistent platform. And so there's something we called the Core 4 that we did and really pushed in that point. And so that the students would have a consistent interface, whether they're in middle school or high school or elementary school. And we're a Google district. All of our kids use Chromebooks. We use that as our basic base platform. And so we use all the Google tools. We use Google Classroom. We use Zoom as our video conferencing platform. And we use a program called Screencastify for recording videos. So those are consistent across all the classrooms. Everybody knows how to use them, both teachers and students. We also really work to provide a really safe and secure online environment for students and for staff. So we've got multiple levels of both filtering and antivirus and those kinds of things that we have in place. But we really, the next line is really more of how we try to operate. So we try to be flexible. We try to be adaptive to what people need in the district. We try to accommodate people's needs, and especially kids' needs if they have different things that they have going on that they need technology to support. And we try to support everybody. And along with that, we try to be fiscally responsible. So we don't tend to try to go out and get the latest, greatest, most expensive thing that's out there. We try to get what's going to work for people. And we try to give people good tools that allow them to do good work. So that's kind of a little snapshot of technology in the district. You guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, Mark, so much for sharing that information. Oh, Erica, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if these platforms, those 4 platforms, were there before COVID, or if those changed with online learning.
We were a Google district before then, and we had been using Google Classroom, but certainly with online learning, the Google Classroom became, a really core thing that everybody had to really get up to speed on. We were not using a lot of the online video before that. And so that was a new learning for a lot of people. And then obviously Zoom and things like that, nobody really did Zoom before, the online learning. So, yeah.
All right.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes.
Thanks for that great, all that information. That was really good. I didn't know all those things. Do we have enough Chromebooks that we won't need to purchase anymore for a while? Or is there like some kind of rotation where we'll be replacing them on some kind of, rotation cycle or something, so that we're not like needing all new ones in 5 years again? Or how does that work?
Yeah, we'll have to get on a replacement cycle, but I don't think it'll have to be as aggressive as we thought it was going to have to be before. So maybe, if you take 5,000 students or so, are you going to do 1,000 a year? Maybe not as much next year, but after that, to keep adding to them. We still have a lot of churn of the Chromebooks, of just repairs and things like that we're seeing with, especially at the secondary level. And so keeping up with that too is a little bit of a challenge, because, we've just seems to be the cost of doing business these days. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 of those were mine.
Yeah, it just happens, right? And so
Yeah.
we're going to have a certain amount of that. Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
I just want to say thank you for everything that you do, because a little bird told me that you never stop working, not even on Christmas. So
Thank you.
That is so true. That is so true. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you.
Mark. I think the classic is, do you have a minute?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every minute. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
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 Thanks
Thank-
again.
Mhm.
All right. So next, I'd like to introduce Brian Long, Director of College and Career Readiness, and he's going to share information about his areas of oversight and programs and services.
Hello, who starts the PowerPoint?
Brian, do you want me to drive it?
Sure, it's only 2 slides. It shouldn't be too hard.
Okay, well, I think I can manage that. Hang on. I'm going to get there.
So I said I'm Brian Long. I'm the Director of College and Career Readiness, which is kind of a very large term that encompasses a lot of very detailed programs. Like, other than Carl Olson, I bet I'd be willing to put me up against details on details on details, but Carl is the detail man when it comes to real crazy details. But the next slide, so we can just see my kind of that overarching. So basically I have 4 areas that I work in. The vast majority of my work falls into career and technical ed, which I'm actually going to end with. We'll go to the other ones that are a little bit smaller, but in terms of rank, in terms of ones that I have to deal with first when they come in, McKinney-Vento always wins, is always number 1. It has to be dealt with first, and it has to be dealt with quickly. Between Shannon Sanchez, who is my admin assist with McKinney-Vento, and I, our goal whenever we have any McKinney-Vento situation come in is a 24-hour turnover. We want whatever the situation is resolved within 24 hours. Whether it's just identifying a kid as meeting the criteria of homelessness, but in most cases, those aren't the ones we're really concerned about. There's a lot more complicated situations in terms of determining who is responsible for this and who's responsible for that, and making sure that we follow all the rules and we help the kid as quickly as possible, which it could be 1 kid, it could be 5 students all at the same time, which we had last week. Actually, we had a family of 5 come in and they needed help right then and there. And we get them first and foremost transportation. That is our absolute number 1 thing that we provide to make sure that wherever they're at, we get them to and from school. And if they're residing solely within our own boundary, we provide both transportation to and from, typically just on a bus, but depending on the situation, it may require a little bit more attention. If they live outside of our district and are still considered, Arlington is still considered our home district, it would be between Cheryl, who, I don't know if Cheryl's on here, but Cheryl does amazing things with transportation. She makes sure that the district that the kid is living in can provide transportation to school, and then we provide the transportation home, and she manages all of that in terms of timing and picking things up and getting kids from point A to point B. And currently we have about 200 McKinney-Vento qualified students. Only about 30 are in the situation where they go outside of our district. The vast majority just get on a school bus like every other kid. But we provide free and reduced lunch in a normal year, but with COVID, everybody gets free lunch. And then last, we really work to make sure that they have access to certain resources and supports. We have a pretty long laundry list of different resources that they can participate in, and we try to help them as much as possible. Our biggest thing is actually to connect them with our student support advocates, which I also oversee and totally didn't put on this list because it's really, really new and I totally forgot about it. But our student support advocates are embedded social workers, both at both high schools and both middle schools. And we're actually going to start moving the middle school person, Rachel Miller, down into some of the grade schools and see how that goes in the next couple of weeks. So that's McKinney-Vento and all the training that goes along with it. The next thing that takes up most of my time and takes my rank is District 504. Those have a timestamp on them as well. It's not nearly as demanding as McKinney-Vento, but we still like to resolve our 504 situations as quickly as possible to make sure the student is getting a free and appropriate education. And those are highly specific. By the time they get to me, it's usually there's basically a question on what services and who and how, and we just make sure we follow all the rules and regulations and make sure all the paperwork is done. And it is very much a case-by-case situation, and almost every case requires kind of a sit down and study and think of, if I'm going to do this, this is the result. If I'm going to do this, this is the result. And then almost always I got to go talk to Dave because Dave will have some input, or I got to go talk to Krissa because she's going to figure out whether it's this or that. And it just gets really complicated. It's a lot of communication, but overall, it actually doesn't, it's not a huge amount of time unless we have some sort of dispute, which we haven't had this year. We're going to go ahead and keep that way. It's pretty straightforward in most cases once we break down and just really look at the nitty gritty. But that's what I do with 504s. And those are our students who have a disability but don't meet the criteria of an IEP. So it's a fun gray line. So, and then the next demanding of my time, typically most of the time the CTE stuff is actually the least, but I can explain that in a bit. Counseling comes next, and counseling primarily is actually at Arlington High School because of the college and career part of things. Whatever we do at Arlington High School, we then do our best to mimic down at AHS or at WHS. The big thing down there is Katie. Katie does an absolutely fantastic job of keeping things going and running down there. And Katie and I probably chit chat at least once a week. But I'm at the high school. I actually have an office at the high school where I oversee all of counseling. So, and I evaluate those ladies in gym, as well as monitoring graduation requirements, overseeing career fair and skilled trades fair with Lisa Rodino. She is our new school to work coordinator. She oversees those two big giant events, as well as some scholarship stuff and our work-based learning students. Officially, I'm the work-based learning instructor because you have to have an actual teacher, and Lisa's not. So I actually supervise those kids, and she takes care of the mountain of paperwork per kid. And then we step over to career and technical education, and this is the bulk of my work, and that is sorting out and making sure that all 22 teachers are following the expectations of career and technical education, aligning their frameworks, and then making sure those frameworks, which are basically our curriculum, are kept up to date, and all of the fun paperwork that goes along with it. And just to give you an idea, in the past week, I've probably produced 200 pages of paperwork just for 2 programs to be approved by the end of the month. So in terms of paperwork and CTE, it is the reason I have a job. There's no two ways around it. I'm really proud of what we've done in CTE. There's not a piece of equipment in a CTE program that a teacher didn't want. Some of them like the older equipment that is older than 5 years. We don't have a welder that's over 5 years old. We don't have a computer that's over 3 years old at this point, I'm pretty sure. We have replaced every single computer and every single piece of equipment because of just the availability of money that we're making happen. And I want to say it's totally my fault, but I'm not very good at being a personal cheerleader. But we have money, and we're using it to make sure that our students are absolutely getting the best industry level technology that we can get that's appropriate for children. There is a little bit of a point where it's just not appropriate for kids. And then last, I'll end with this one, is we are bound and determined to start our career internships. We have been trying to make this happen for I don't know how long. Chris, when did we start this? 3 years ago?
It was before COVID, for
It
sure.
was way before COVID. We were almost ready to make it happen, and then COVID. And with Lisa's help, we're going to get at least 10. That's our goal, is 10 good, solid career internships for the summer, where kids are going to get a half a credit for each of them that they finish, and hopefully there'll be a really good experience for both the community as well as the students themselves. So I deal with just a huge amount of different things that I don't even know how to get through some days, to be honest. But here I am. Any questions?
So Brian, I wanted, you've mentioned a couple times to the board that you have funding available, to purchase these items. So could you clarify for the board how funding is brought into the Career Tech program?
Sure. So career and technical education is entirely funded by Kids in Seats. And it is in addition to our basic funding. So CTE is actually funded at 1.2% or 1.2 of the standard basic funding model. So each student we have in a seat all day. So if you had a kid in a CTE class that bounced from class to class to class, and they attended only CTE classes all day, and it was one kid, that would generate roughly $10,000. We have 351 kids at the high school level that do that, and 31 total kids at the middle school level, which we actually just call them FTEs, full-time enrollments. We have thousands and thousands of kids. We just count them as if there was one kid all day, and it's 351 currently at the high school level and 31 at the middle school level, generating a total at the high school level of $3.3 million, and at the middle school level, I want to say $70,000. So the big chunk of that gets taken off by salaries, like 85%, like a huge chunk of it. But that's still left this year at the high school level, just right around, just under $1 million this year alone to spend on materials, supplies, and other costs. And I've managed to get that down as of today to the best of what Megan and I could figure, because I have an advisory board meeting tomorrow, to $500,000. So we still have $500,000 to spend, which you'd think I'd be like, yay, it's really hard to spend that kind of money. It's a lot more paperwork. I mean, it's just a lot.
And Brian,
yeah.
Also that the funding that comes in for CTE can only be used in that area. It's not like the district can then take that and let's put it in a different, area. We can't do that.
Yeah, it is very, very closely earmarked, and it is monitored very closely that it is spent for career and technical education purposes only. And each time a dollar is spent, it is directly tied to a class, and what we call is a SIP code. It's not subtle. It's not like a gray area at all. Every single time I say, okay, we're going to buy a computer, Mark will ask me where it's going to go. Kevin then identifies exactly who's getting that computer, IDs the tag, and then Megan codes it only to that program. So we know exactly where every dollar goes, because every once in a while the auditor comes in and says, please show me where all this money went. And we can go, here we go. So it is definitely not a free-for-all set of money. It has to be spent on CTE only. I can reserve 10% from year to year called carryover, which this year would be around $330,000, which I'm going to bet we're going to keep every single bit of that, and because spending that kind of money here at the end is going to be pretty tough. So I'll do my darndest, but it's just trying to spend it in really economical, logical ways that is important to me more than anything. And I'm not a frivolous person by any means when it comes to money. I want it to have a lasting positive impact, not, hey, let's just do this. No. So cool. Any other questions?
Thanks, Brian.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. So next, I would like to invite Carl Olson, Director of Categorical Programs, to share. And Carl, would you like to drive your own PowerPoint? I'll stop sharing, or would you like me to?
I am happy to drive.
Okay, let me stop driving and you can take over.
Okay. Just a second here. Okay, does everyone see that okay?
Yes, looks good.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm Carl Olson, Director of Categorical Programs, and I'm going to be sharing and highlighting 3 of the programs that I facilitate. Overall, I also work with early learning, so I do work with preschool and kindergarten groups, but that I'm going to save for a future presentation for sake of time. So an overview that I know I've shared with some of you, but I want to make sure that everyone has the same information. So the first part has to do with our remedial programs, which are funded by Title I Part A and LAP, our Learning Assistance Program. So with Title I, those are federal funds, and not including any carryover, which we are wrapping up right now. Approximately $600,000 granted for the purpose of supporting students in reading, writing, and math. It requires for our school-wide program that schools have 40% or have a waiver, because our two schools that operate school-wide programs are just below 40% currently, and those are Eagle Creek and Kent Prairie. And then our lab program, that is state funds, which is approximately 1.3 million. And that is for K-12 assistance in reading, writing, math, and various readiness for those subjects, as well as supports. You'll frequently hear us talk about our care team, and it funds 2 full-time TOSAs who work on behavior, attendance, family support, really making sure that students have kind of that readiness to learn. And all 4 elementary schools receive that lab funding. So a few updates for this year. We are conducting monthly remedial team meetings, and I will tell you, with all programs, we have amazing staff. We truly have some of our best and most passionate educators working in these programs, which is necessary because many of these students have a variety of needs to be met. We have started parent newsletters, as well as we've been surveying parents online as to what they would like in a newsletter. And most likely in February or March, we will be sharing our first ever Arlington specific newsletter. Currently, we are using something that is used by many districts, but we've asked parents what they would like to see, and we'll be starting that soon, as well as surveying parents for family engagement and events that they would like to take part in. Continue with research-based strategies for our striving learners, including curriculum materials, strategies, and training to make sure that we're really maximizing the time. Planning parent engagement activities. We are fortunate that we are back to in-person remedial services. All of last year it was virtual, and so our wonderful teachers and paraeducators were serving kids in a virtual mode, and now they're back. And then for our care team, we've been working on developing some processes that are consistent across all buildings, which include elements such as screening that we're looking at of all kids, referral processes, and other issues that will really help us make sure that our supports are the same and we're kind of speaking the same language. As well as this team will support attendance and meeting those regulations, and then also family connections to support the family so we're on the same page. The next program I want to share about is for our English language learner support, which is funded by 2 sources: Transitional Bilingual, which is state, and Title III. Transitional Bilingual is the bulk of our funds, approximately $500,000, which is directly for instruction. So this goes to pay for our interpreter tutors at each building, as well as our teachers who are working both at the high school and the K-8 level. We're fortunate to also have some ESSER funds approved to provide kind of that extra boost so our interpreter tutors can be full-time and we can make sure to help these kiddos due to COVID start closing that gap. And then of course, Title III is our federal funds, mainly for professional development and certain other materials to help support them, as well as this can support after-school programs, and it supports our parent English class that we just started last week. So big updates. The major need that we found that I've talked about was staffing at Arlington High School. I would say our students who qualify for these services truly did suffer from the impact of COVID, and having them back now, we are trying to make up some gaps and have been doing a lot of work with counselors, administration, and staff at the high school who have been just wonderfully open and collaborating to make sure we can do all we can to meet the needs for these kids and connect them to school. So we've gone from having just 1 period a day of ELL support and an interpreter tutor to a full-time teacher, Kim Contreras, who is amazing and very experienced, an interpreter tutor, and are currently posting for an EL advocate position who would also be available after school for supports, connecting kids to activities and sports and those types of areas. Our major goal was decreasing the F rate for our high school qualified, ELL qualified students, and already we're seeing great results. I think the F rate at one check, it was down 2/3, so only 1/3 of what it was compared to the end of last year. And I believe it has gone down even further. I just looked at the data today when I was covering that classroom because the teacher was out today. And one of the best things that I can tell you, it comes from a student I talked to, Victor, who he mentioned that, last year was tough. Virtual learning was tough. He wasn't doing well. And this year he was mostly A's and B's. He feels good about his learning, but he also feels like he has a lot of people kind of in his court supporting him. So that is one of many successes that we are finding for these kids. And then, of course, the English class for parents, which we started last week in connection with Everett Community College, who actually runs the program, but at Arlington High School. So we are doing 1/4 of this program this year, which Kim Contreras also teaches for the college, that combines both learning English as well as topics such as next week, we're going to be working with parents on accessing Skyward and ways to help support their students in school. So really working on building connections with parents and advocates that we can help reach out to other families. And then we're also utilizing what's called Elevation, both for collecting data, getting information from teachers that work with the students as far as needs, and then also promoting instructional strategies that are really beneficial for language development for all students. And then a final big change, we are both starting the new WIDA Access Assessment, which WIDA, some of you are familiar with as far as a program used to support students and standards who qualify for English language supports in up to 40 some states. Our state of Washington just recently adopted this. So we are putting both these into place this year. So lots of learning. And then finally, highly capable program, which are state funds, roughly $160,000. That goes to pay for our wonderful coordinator, Verlaine. And Verlaine has really been influential in helping us with the direction, with supporting teachers and teams as we look at what we're going to do to support these students in quality learning all day. And this also goes to support our highly capable advisory team, which is currently working on the direction on how we can support teachers and students should they be clustered in a classroom to maximize their learning. And so here are some of the highlights. Wonderful certificated facilitator. Berlin Myers is terrific. We started a program with Renzulli, where each student has a license, which through a few initial assessments can tailor project-based learning and other activities towards their interests and strengths. Our highly capable advisory team is meeting to develop kind of the course for the future and working with Dr. Richard Cash, who has also done some professional development with staff members on how to best work with students to provide needs at all levels. We kicked off our online student learning plans. We're getting ready to launch that so parents can also see that at home. So there'll be an online platform where students can be downloading their materials, parents can view them and have ongoing dialogue. And like I said, lots of future planning, which is consistent with all these programs as we look to continue these supports. All right, I will stop sharing. And do you have any questions? I made it under 10 minutes by 3 seconds. I have a timer.
You did great. I mean, yeah, it was well done. But are there questions? I think that you can, the whole theme of this time, of this study session is how are we supporting each student? And you can see that we have a variety of different programs, different services to support students with varied needs. And it's good. It's a good thing. Well, thanks, Carl. I guess you're off the hook. No questions at this moment.
Right. Well, and if anyone ever wants to come by and just visit some of these programs, just let me know.
Thanks, Carl.
You bet.
All right. So next, I'm going to attempt to be Dave McKellar. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and get to the right spot here. So Dave McKellar is our Director of Special Education, and I'm going to share his slides and provide information and answer any questions that you may have, or say he'll answer them later, but hopefully I can answer most of them. So first of all, our special education services. This is another area where we provide support and services to students that have been identified that they need to have specially designed instruction. So a type of instruction that requires an individual education plan. And there's legal requirements about what qualifies for that and what the steps are with that. But we have about 824 students that have IEPs. That's for short, for individual education plan. And these are students who, we serve students from age 3 to 21. So that's the range. And we have, it starts and it begins with developmental preschool, which are ages 3 to 5. And that means that when a student turns 3 years of age and they've been already identified, because there's a birth to 3 program that the state has where students are identified at birth or between birth and 3, that they have a need. Immediately when they turn 3 years of age, then they begin in our program. There's a connection and a transition there. So we have our developmental preschool programs for those students 3 to 5. And then from 5 to 21, we have different offerings or availabilities of services and programs. Then resource room is really predominantly academically focused. So that's where a student has been identified that they need to have specially designed instruction in areas like of math, reading, ELA, so language arts, possibly some behavior, some organizational skills, but it's primarily in the academic area. Extended resources, maybe there's a functional area that's been added to that need. That could be the organizational skills, or it could be behavioral support, or it could be another area as well. And then we have our emotionally behavioral programs that are self-contained for the most part, but we work towards as much inclusionary practices as possible. That's our goal, and increasing that. And that's focused on those students that have been identified that they need to have specially designed support or instruction for behavior. And then the next one is life skills. And these are students that have been significantly impacted within the functional area of their life. So functionally life skills focused. And then we have our transitions program, which is our 18 to 21. These are students who have life skills needs, and we're transitioning them from the school level back into the work. Vocational, looking for jobs and getting them connected to life after high school. We have some students that require even a higher level of placement or service that we don't have available in our system. This is there's not as many here, there's few, but they may require outside placements. There are different agencies that provide specially designed instruction in more of a therapeutic classroom, or even in one case we have an individual student who's out of state in a situation there where their needs can be met. So we have non-public agency placements, and then we also alongside our teaching staff and our paraeducators, we have our ESAs, our educational staff associates. And these are individuals that have special certificates and expertise, such as our speech language pathologists. We have our psychologists, we have our occupational therapists, and our physical therapists. These are called our ESAs. And they're special in that they have special certificates, and sometimes they're really hard to fill positions. And so it requires us to contract sometimes with outside agencies for those individual needs that students have. So that's an overview of the different types of services and programs. The focus has been and will continue to be for this year and moving forward, inclusionary practices and the universal design for learning. The inclusionary practices project, there's a group, as we mentioned earlier when Carrie was presenting, that we've been involved in this project for over 2 years. This is going on the 3rd year, maybe even the 4th year. And basically the idea that every student, and it is by law, that they need to be educated or have instruction in the least restrictive environment. That's called LRE. And so you have to determine what that is. So you want to give them that specially designed instruction of what they need, but keep them in the less restrictive environment possible. So in the general education classroom, give them if you can, provide the specially designed instruction within the general ed classroom setting. So that we've actually have data that has assessed what our LRE rating is, and we are working towards being more inclusive in our practices. And we do have board policy on working towards that as well. And also universal design for learning, that only makes sense, that we would provide variability and have firm goals and flexible means to support the students with their specially designed instruction. The recovery services, this is an effort to identify with our students that have an IEP, what increased gaps of learning have been created because of COVID, because of remote learning. Now, we're fortunate in that last year when we moved to remote initially, we brought as many of our students that had special needs that we could back on campus the first day of school last year. So students that had needed to have that self-contained classroom, and it was really hard for them to be in remote learning. So we did do that, but we still need to assess what gaps in their learning, significant gaps, more so than what, and this is hard to discern. So IEP teams right now are working through this to identify what are those gaps, what are the needs, and how will we support the students in recovering from those gaps that have been created. The recovery services they would take place, well, for sure there'd be summer school. It could be, it hasn't been identified exactly what this will be, but it could be extra time. Maybe we'll have students stay on Fridays when there's early dismissal. Maybe the students would stay and get extra instruction during that time. It could be, not that we are saying we're doing on a Saturday, but it would be anything outside and over and above what we're already providing. So they're working on this, and Dave will provide more information about this moving forward. He shares here too about our budget. You can see that it's significant. It's in the millions. So but as you can see, the revenue is that, but our expenditures, we have salaries, and we have contracted services and student services. Those are the outside agencies, non-public agencies. The district does subsidize, special education. So the money that we bring in does not cover the money that's provided us, doesn't cover the expenditures, but we are able to, there's something called safety net. And so we can, when there's a student that is a high cost. So for example, if we have to send them to an outside public agency, such as out of state, and they could cost a significant amount of money, we can submit that over a certain amount of money to get recouped back to our budget. But anyway, it's a significant cost, but it's essential to support our students that have special needs. And let's see, that's the next area any questions about special education before I move on? Okay, good. That's good. Dave's probably listening right now. Maybe he knows the answers to some that might be on your mind. So just send them my way and I'll share them with Dave. Health services, of course, our amazing district nurse, Krista Kramer. She has been leading us through this pandemic. We have 9 licensed school nurses And we have one health room assistant who is at Weston High School. We have, as a result of the needs that have taken place for COVID, we have added 7 health room assistants, and we have 1 unfilled yet to be filled. Initially, we added those as 4-hour positions. We now increase those, all of them, to 7.5 hours. And then we hired also a contact tracer. So she is full-time, and she works alongside Krissa to do contact tracing. And we just posted 2 more positions, and this is in anticipation of the test to stay program. We would need to have, so where it says two DO testing site staff, they're unfilled but filled right now, but they're posted. This would be to help with the additional testing that would need to take place with test to stay. So, and I will give you a update on that. I am working with the health department. I did just speak with them this afternoon, and the MOU that was sent to me, there's some changes, and they're making those changes, but they will not be ready in time for Monday. So we would anticipate that MOU would come to the board at the February board meeting. And let's see, so he has here that, and I know Krissa worked with him on this slide as well, is that, we've been working very hard, our staff team, the health services team, to keep our staff in school on a daily basis. And they do, the nursing staff, the health services staff, they do medical 504s. So we not only have 504s that are academic needs, but we have medical 504s. So if a student has, let's say, for example, asthma, and they have an inhaler, there would be a medical plan that would be a medical 504 that has to be written up and in place before the student would start school. So we have, and he says here that the individual health plans are just under 1,000. And so, and some of those are life-threatening. So health services. And I guess that's the last slide. So any questions on health services? Okay. Thank you. Mary, I'm going to move on to the next one if we're okay with that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, next I would like to invite Carrie Helgeson, Director of Equity and Student Wellbeing, to share. And Carrie, are you going to share your slides?
I can share my slides, yeah.
Okay, let's stop sharing.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Are you guys, are your heads exploding yet with all this information? So I'm going to share 3 main areas that I oversee here. So give me a minute, call up my slideshow. As Chris said, I'm the Director of Equity and Student Wellbeing, and this is my first year in this position after taking a break from Arlington for a little while and as a principal, and then just recently come back. So the first area I want to highlight is attendance. And as you know, with the COVID pandemic, with our students out in remote learning, it has really been difficult to get some of our kids back to school and re-engage. So we still have a number of students that we have very few days that we have seen the whites of their eyes on our campuses. So spending a lot of time working with schools, administration, as well as counselors and attendance secretaries to figure out what supports do our students need in order to feel safe coming back onto our campuses. And they're out for a variety of reasons. Some don't feel safe, some just are having a hard time feeling like they can come back, some are feeling overwhelmed. So working around this whole idea of the multi-tier systems of support. So this is one thing that as a team, we're going to create. So what does it look like for Arlington at that tier 1 level? So what does every student receive? So examples like attendance letters that we send out to each and every family about why it's important to attend school. And then school-wide attendance initiatives. And that looks different depending on the building, but having something in place for each building around some initiative. And then what about our tier 2 students that need more support to come to school on a regular basis? So some examples of this would be meetings with school staff, meeting with the counselor. What supports do you need to come to school on a regular basis? Teacher check-ins. So a lot of our students, that's the most important person, is that teacher check-in. So what teachers have relationships with that student that they can check in with on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, so nice to see you at school today, just acknowledging their attendance. And then making some type of attendance plan along with the parents. What barriers do they need to remove in order to get their child to school on a regular basis? And then, of course, we have some of those students at the tier 3 level that, along with all of those building supports, we still have severe absenteeism. So these students haven't benefited from our school-based interventions. So a referral to community engagement board, and then hopefully we can get them re-engaged through that. But if not, then filing the petition to the courts. So some steps we're taking is the ongoing secretary meetings, like I talked about. We're monitoring daily attendance for our students in that tier 2 category. We're creating a process to contact families in more than just one way. So some families like to be contacted through email. They don't want to answer their telephone. They just want to be contacted through email. So having that line of communication go through email. So multiple attempts, different ways. And then I've also spent some time this year just reaching out to some different community resources. So what supports can they offer our students out in the community to get them to re-engage? A few changes to community engagement boards that we're working on this year is, before it used to be one night a month at the district level, families would come in, we'd have a team of the same people for them to talk about what are the barriers and then what supports can we offer. So something we're trying this year is having it at the school base, because that's our comfort. Or maybe it's at a community center because they can't get to the school. So we go to them to offer the community engagement board. And then having more actual school members on the team, because that's where the relationship is. So just a few changes with that. Any questions on attendance? It's been one of the biggest obstacles this year for some of our kids. So the next area is behavior. So just like the number of students that are having a difficult time re-engaging in school, we are also seeing an increase in student behavior. And this is a pattern across the state, and I'm sure across the nation. So it's not solely a problem just in Arlington. But if we think about what some students have been experiencing, it's really not a surprise to us that students are having a hard time coming back to school, learning the structure, rules. But it is our sad reality right now. If we think about 20 months of kids not really being in person in school, some of those students haven't had structure. Some of those students haven't had rules. Some of those students have had way too much freedom to do as they choose to do. So we have the typical student behavior of meltdowns, lack of coping mechanisms that we're working through the social emotional learning, especially at the elementary level with our new Purposeful People curriculum. We also, like Carl talked about, we have the care team at the elementary level, and as Brian Long referred to, the student support advocates at the secondary level. So they're all part of working with our students just about that re-engagement and how to interact at school again. But unfortunately, we have, quite a few students that are really struggling with feelings of hopelessness. We have some drugs that are brought into the school and criminal behavior. So those supports are going to have to be different for those kiddos. So we have a lot of students that are at the secondary level that are coming to school with alcohol in their possession, marijuana in their possession. Vaping has become this widespread issue all across the board. So for those students, we have suspensions that are happening. Our first step to that is an in-school suspension for the students to be able to take a class, because we have a class developed. It's an online class on vaping and there's about 5 different lessons within that class on the effects of vaping, what peer pressure, what stress, and what are some other ways to cope with stress that they may be experiencing. And then along the same lines, we have our student threat assessments, which are really geared to evaluate and manage or reduce any potentially threatening student behaviors. So myself, along with Brian Lewis, and then a team's school-based team, conduct these student threat assessments. And there have been a number of them this year, more than what typical it would be in a normal school year, but that is again across the state. You know, I'm part of a coalition and we meet about once every 3 or 4 weeks and we talk about student threat assessments, and it is a statewide issue right now. But I will say that these have lessened as our year has progressed. So getting kids back in school, getting them back familiar, developing those in-person relationships with staff, I think has really helped to lessen the amount of student threat assessments that we've had to conduct in the last month or so. But again, these are all just different ways. They're individualized ways of how to support our students with whatever behaviors are happening in their life. So. And then the last area I wanted to touch on that I've talked about before, but we have a couple of new board members, is the district equity plan. So that was adopted last spring. So it's set out to be a 5-year plan because it's a pretty meaty document. And then what does it look like in year 1? And then what can we build on for the next few years? And the purpose of that is to just ensure an equity lens is used to look at and inspect every aspect of our system to ensure that we are using equitable practices everywhere so that each student succeeds. So like Carl always teases me about, well, it's an equity thing. So I'm involved in a lot of other different conversations because equity involves everything in our schools every day with every student. So we do have a district community equity team that meets monthly. So this year, our focus has been on it's really been a learning year. So we have many different student groups that we serve in our buildings. And those student groups have different needs. So what supports do they need in order to be successful in our buildings? So we're having a lot of conversation, a lot of learning, and then conversation about what do those supports look like so we can put them into practice for next year. And then one thing I wanted to share. So each month I'm creating what we call this Padlet. I'm going to share one of them with you. And it's really about sharing, different resources with staff that range from teacher resources, lesson plans, videos, and the books they can read to the class, novels. But I've been putting these on the district website with the help of Gary. So if we go to the district website here, and then under administration is the equity. And then if you look here at equity monthly themes, we click on those. So the September theme I have not done yet. I had this idea starting in about the middle of September, so that one didn't get created. But there was the October theme of Disability Awareness Month, November theme, Native American Heritage Month. December theme was kind of a new concept to many of us, which was allyship. And then January theme, which I was going to share with you, is National Poverty Awareness in America. So when I meet with the district equity team next week, this will be our focus, is learning about our students that are living in poverty and what supports we can put into our building to support them. So these are just different educational resources that staff can read on their own. And then these scroll down here. So these are, you just kind of look down here, there's overarching, and then what are some elementary activities that teachers can do in their classrooms, as well as secondary activities. And then what are some children's books that they could read with their class? These are picture books mainly. And then also, so what are some novels, if we get into the secondary world, that we could share with our students? and then always some videos that they could watch. Some of the videos are student appropriate. Some of the videos are more teacher information. So that's something I'm developing and sharing out at the beginning of each month, so that teachers have resources in their hands to be able to share, address these with their students. And then other than that, that's kind of the highlights I wanted to touch on as far as the Department of Equity and student well-being. Are there any questions you guys have for me?
I think their plate is very full, Carrie.
I know, I think it's good that I went last, that they don't have any more questions. Their
Tonight,
brains are
I
exploding.
feel like we got all of our bingo cards filled. Like we got the IEPs and the 504s and all the CTEs and all the alphabets.
Right?
and yet there's
And that's
more.
all about equity.
And
it's all about
variability.
different choices. And yes, it's so great. So
Yeah.
thank
Yep, for sure, for sure. Very, very, it is true. It is very true. We're giving you an example of a buffet tonight. You can see that within our district, we have a buffet of services and support for our students, and it's good. So next, I would like to invite Ed Ellsworth, who is he's going to share with us, he's the director of, he does student support service or support services and nutritional services. So Ed, take it away. Would you like to share your screen or do you want me to drive?
I would love to share my screen.
Okay, go forth. You're set to go.
Okay, let's see if I can figure it out. Okay, does that work?
Looks good.
Okay, speaking of smorgasbords, as Chris said, I'm Ed Ellsworth, the Director of Child Nutrition Support Services. And we're part of operations, and many of you seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before. And I have this model in my office to remind me the good that we do and that we need to do, and services provide to staff and students and families to help them succeed and be successful in their learning. That physiological needs at the bottom, we're providing food, we're providing clean water, we're providing warm spaces to learn in, good air quality, and all of those good things. We're providing safety with warm water for washing hands, sanitizers, just a lot of good things so people feel good when they come in, make sure the locks work, and that kind of thing. I also would argue that we provide love and belonging. The child nutrition staff love to connect with kids, and they're so excited this year to have kids coming back in, that they could see the kids again and greet them every day and provide that smiling face. So support services provides a lot of that. And so what we serve, services we provide, we have grounds, we have custodial, we have maintenance, and then the child nutrition, the food services. And, providing a good quality, beautiful environment. Studies show that if the grounds look good and they're clean, that the kids are going to feel proud of their schools, and they're going to be more successful. So just providing a great environment is positive. One of the things I'll focus on is what we've done with the child nutrition side of our house. Because there's a lot of coordination that's gone on across the district and within the schools and within the departments that have made this successful for kids and supporting families. When COVID started, we started closing schools. We interfaced with OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, to find out what waivers the federal government had given us to operate under. Because normally we operate under a National School Lunch Program system where kids eat in congregate areas. They eat in the cafeteria. They have to eat at certain times. And these waivers allowed us a lot of flexibility so that we were able to serve out in the community. We were able to serve breakfast and lunch at the same time so they could pick it up and eat it at home. And there was just a lot of variation. So we determined to eat hot meals daily, or provide those hot meals daily, to continue that service that we'd started the school year with. Brian Lewis and Gary put together a sign-up system. Families could sign up for these meals, so we knew kind of what to prepare for. We bought containers that we could put the food in, that send out hot and cold. They would keep that temperature is correct, so they were safe food. Brian worked with the transportation and organized the drivers and paras and people to go out and deliver and pick it all up, and we would send it out and make sure it was all out quickly and efficiently. And we trained staff, and it was quite a well-run organization there. We were delivered up to 25 sites throughout the community, from Oso to Jordan River Trails and everywhere in between. And the families would come pick up this food daily, and then they would have that access. We also partnered with the food bank, and they provided these packs called Meals Till Monday. It was food that would provide nutritional food for the kids through the weekends. So we provided Monday through Friday, and then that additional with the food bank, and that was a big help. So that got us through that first COVID spring. And we provided meals through the summer. And then last year, when things came, we started bringing back, we had the hybrids. We provided daily meals to students as they came on site. We also provided weekly meal packs for families to pick up at their school site. We wanted to do that at the school, so that, again, the parents could start connecting and the kids could start connecting with the kitchen staff, and they also had the pickups with the teachers for their learning materials, and so started reconnect back into the schools, and that was important, we believe. And then we also continued the Meals Till Monday. So what are we doing this year? Our on-site feeding at all schools, because all kids are back. The universal feeding, which Brian Long mentioned earlier, all federal government's paying meals for all students to eat. We're providing on-site service, varies as we go throughout, depending on which school. But we have grab and go, we serve on trays and plates. We're serving the classroom, we're serving in the cafeterias. It's just whatever meets the needs of the schools and the students there. Some challenges that we have dealt with: increased participation with the free meals. We're serving way more students than we've ever served before, which is provided some challenges with staffing and food supply. We're not having the supply that we would have had in the past. There's decreased availability. We've had foods that we've ordered have been canceled. Our menu changes constantly because of it. But it's okay. People are dealing with that well. We had a new challenge thrown at us with a new law from the Department of Ecology that says we can't just hand out plasticware anymore. So we can only offer it. So we had these grab and go bags with the plasticware in it. We can't do that anymore. We have to put it out there and let them choose it themselves. So that threw a little wrinkle in. So it's like, okay, bring it on. And then we've had increased staffing needs, because now we're bagging and tagging. We're not just serving students as they come through. We have to put it all in the grab and go that sends them out to the classrooms, wherever they are eating. So additional hours, lack of applicants and subs, like we're dealing with it in the teaching world. The paras, it's the buses. It's a challenge to keep things running. Our participation this year, just a little chart to see what's happened. If you look at 18-19, in September for breakfast, we were serving about 509 meals a month. A day. And then lunch was about 1732, same amount that started 1920. And then last year when we had that hybrid, we saw a huge drop because kids weren't even at school and they weren't picking them up necessarily. This year, with the free meals. You can see the huge jump, almost triple there with breakfast in September, and double almost. I'm not the mathematician, but a lot more there for lunches as well. And it just kept going up through October. You see quite a big jump there from September to October, and consistently through November and into December. So a lot more meals. So where are we going? We don't know. There's bills out there in the federal level to continue the universal feeding. There's bills out there to lower the community eligibility, which means community eligibility says if you have a certain percentage of free and reduced qualified folks, then you can provide free meals to all students in that school or that district. If you reduce that, then the eligibility is more easily reached. However, it's still a costly thing. You need to really have about 70% free and reduced to make it pay. Otherwise, you're using local monies to cover those costs. So it's not necessarily a way we would want to go. Or we're just going to go back to our regular lunch programs. So a lot of questions still we don't have any answers for, but we're hoping to hear something sooner than later. So there we have it. Any questions? All right.
Thanks,
you.
Ed. Thanks. Thanks for keeping the food on the plates or in the bags, I guess we would say, because they're bagged.
It's all in the bag, yeah.
Hey,
All
thanks,
right.
Ed, for doing all your stuff. And as you hinted last night, I hope you give us plenty of advance notice, not really us because we don't, but Dr. Sweeting and her team when you intend to retire, because you're a pivotal position in everything we do. And we need to make sure we get somebody who can replace you, which will be a challenge, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your kind words.
Oh, you bet. We've known you for a long time, Ed. Doing a great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are not any more questions, then we will move on to our last director that's going to speak for the night. And he's going to talk about communications and how important that is and how we're doing. So Director Sable, Gary Sable, Director of Communication, are you going to drive your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'll drive my own. Thanks, Dr. Sweeting. Let me share here quickly. Let's see here. All right. Let's see. Start show. Where's that at? In the beginning. Here we go. Okay. So good evening. Gary Sable, Director of Communications. Before I go to the metrics of the things that I do, I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what the communications program overseas in the district. So it's kind of a smorgasbord, if you will, of different things. Certainly media relations is one of those types of things. And really, before I jump into these, basically this supports students and families by really trying to promote those really positive stories of all the great things that our students are doing, our teachers are doing, our staff. It's really to promote that in the community. And I'll remember it was a few years ago before COVID, we had a Community Voices event. And I remember one of the attendees sharing that Arlington was a destination school district. And that always has stuck with me, because it's really people choice transfer into Arlington to go to our schools. And so I feel like it's my job to really show everyone why we are a destination school district. And so that's why, for instance, media relations, it's everything from sending out press releases on different stories that are happening in our schools. Certainly, if there's a question from a reporter or anything like that, I take care of that as well. Publications, we put out a number of publications throughout the year. Our school's community newsletter that goes out 4 times a year to everyone in the 98223 zip code and any families that choice transfer in. So that's kind of shares what's happening in our schools. Certainly the wall calendar, everyone has received their wall calendar. If you haven't, let me know. But that's something that people look forward to. Not only does it showcase, again, some of those great stories of our students and staff, but also includes our family handbook. So in case you haven't seen, the first part is the calendar, the second part's the family handbook, because we're required by law to share a lot of those documents with families. And so that's why we put all in one document so it's easy to find. The staff newsletter, we send this out throughout the school year. This keeps our staff apprised of what's happening. Again, they can read the great stories of our students and staff in there as well, and different things like that. Social media, that's a part of my department as well. And so that's everything from Facebook, Twitter. I lump YouTube in with that. There's videography farther on, but YouTube's part of that. So all the board meetings are up on YouTube after they're completed with the Zoom. It's kind of they're recorded at the same time. The website, it's probably, I would say, the number one communication tool, because our different websites have so much information for families and community members and others to find. So I oversee the district website, and I train web coordinators at each of the school sites to update theirs. And it's funny, you heard all these different departments tonight, and the great thing about what I do is I work closely with them. For instance, the website, I work closely with pretty much all those folks that Mark mentioned on his staff. They're great. And help update some of the other department web pages on the website as well. So we got a great team in Arlington. So I get to work with all of them. It's excellent. School Messenger, and I'll show you some metrics here in just a moment, but School Messenger is a very effective tool that we use. That's how we communicate via either email, phone, or text, or all three, or different variations of that. As you saw last week, we had some different challenges due to COVID. And so it's my job to send that information out as soon as possible so families can make arrangements if needed. So very important tool. And certainly during COVID, the school messengers just skyrocketed. They're starting to come down a little bit, thankfully, because during the really hot spots during COVID, it was pretty crazy. So anyway, Peach Jar e-flyers is another great way. This is more of a resource for families. If nonprofit community organizations have information they want to share with families, they can use Peach Jar for that. Probably the best part of my job is going out into schools and taking pictures and video of our classes in action, showing students, showing teachers, staff, doing all the amazing things they do in our district. And that's by far, I just love being out in the schools and doing that. There's so many great things happening in our schools, and it's fun to really share that with everybody. Less fun are public records requests and records retention, but that's a very necessary part of my job, making sure any sort of request for information is taken care of in a timely manner. There's a lot of RCWs and different laws that govern that, and I have to make sure those are all followed. Same with records retention, got to make sure all the documents are in order, that sort of thing. ACE, I know a number of board members have been on the ACE committee and are now on the board. It's a great way to learn how the district works. I'm the staff liaison for ACE. The Golden Eagles program, this is for senior citizens in our community 65 and older who can get free or reduced admission to many of our sporting events or plays. We also, before COVID, had a pie social in the spring, and our senior citizens absolutely love that. Usually they come to a certain, usually elementary school site, and the kids, the choir would sing for the seniors while they were there. So they love that. And finally, the EMARC, the Emergency Management and Response Committee, I'm part of that as well. That kind of goes with the whole PIO incident command thing. So there's kind of some crossover there. Quickly, I want to show you some different metrics of things that have happened. It just kind of show you how things have changed from year to year. So these are kind of our social media stats. You'll see, Facebook likes, these have continued to increase. Same with Twitter followers. So, I like to see those, go up and up. I'd love to see, many, many more on each of these, but, as long as we're going in the right direction, I'm happy with that. So I talked about how, so if you look from 2019 to 2020 for school messenger, we nearly doubled the amount of school messenger communications that were sent out to our families. And I think I think it's important to communicate, but you also don't want to over communicate. And so I'm glad that it's starting to come down again, because I don't want people to get sick of all the messages we send them. So yeah, I'm glad that it's finally slowing down a little bit for School Messenger. YouTube, you can kind of see some of the different videos posted. This is from the 2020-21 year. So this is kind of last year was the last metric we had for this. You'll see a jump from 2019 to 2020. That was because that's when we were running our levies and bond, and we had a number of videos that were posted during that time. So that really kind of had a big jump right there. Press releases, before COVID, we had a pretty good number of press releases. It's more challenging during COVID to send these out, but I'm hoping to keep increasing those, because again, that's important. And you'll see this little picture here. This is of the Still-Gamish Valley Learning Center kindergartners. They during December, they went to the Arlington Library and got their library cards for the first time. So this is just a great example. Even during COVID, our schools are doing amazing things. So I just love stories like this. It was great. So finally, I want to talk about Parchment. So Parchment is a way for high schoolers and even alumni to get transcripts from either Arlington High School or Weston. And what we did is a couple of years ago, I applied for a grant from the Washington State Archives and was awarded the grant. And what they did is they scanned all of our permanent student records. So just so you all know, a permanent student record is a 100-year-old record that we keep in a vault. And so basically we sent boxes and boxes and boxes to this Parchment company, and they scanned them all. And so now we have digital records of all of our 100-year-old documents from the high school, and Weston has some as well. And so you'll see, the first year we started this was 2020. So that was just kind of a snapshot, and you'll see it increased quite a bit in 2021. And so, and we offer this free of charge to alumni to get their transcripts. And so as a service that we provide, to our students and alumni. So it's just something that we're pleased that we can do for them. And that's it.
And this was an effort, the Parchment, and providing the opportunity for students to access their transcripts for free. We wanted to increase their access to higher education, whether that was vocational, career, or a four-year college. We wanted to make sure that they could do that without having to pay. I think it was like $2.50 or maybe even more, Gary. I don't know how much they had to pay, but
yeah. I recently had to get some of my own transcripts from some of the universities I attended, and it can be pretty expensive. Anything we can do to help our alumni and all those, it's great. It really is. Any questions?
Again, their plates are full.
Yeah, I understand. It's like the fire hose approach. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much. So President Levesque, I think that is the learning for tonight.
I think that was incredibly thorough and broad, deep and broad. It was a lot of great information about the thousands of things that our school district does to help reach all children and help educate all of them in various different ways. And it was very informative. So thank you very much for Carrie and Mark and Brian and Carl and Dave and Carrie and Ed and Gary. Thank you all for sharing. And I didn't realize we had 736 staff members. So I'm adding that to my bingo card for next time. So there's just a lot of really great, wonderful things. Thank you very much for sharing tonight. I wanted just to remind you all about our next meeting. It is on Monday, January 24th at the Burns Performing Arts Center. It will be in person. Also, it will be available on Zoom and on YouTube. We want to make sure that everybody remembers that masks are required for attendance for all, regardless of their immunization status. And with that, I think we can have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion? Does anybody want to say aye? Or we can just
I'll
stay
make
here.
the motion to adjourn. I couldn't get my mouse to wake up. It fell asleep. But yeah, I'll motion to adjourn.
And I heard
Second,
Mike say second. Both mics seconded. And so we'll just have a roll call vote for adjournment.
Director Ray,
Bye.
Director Kingman,
aye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Knapp.
Aye.
All right, meeting's adjourned. We'll see you all on Monday. Have a great night and thank you very much for being here.